What's going on, guys? TCG Guide here, and it is finally time for me to profile my Fluffals deck again. As you guys know, I was super excited for Soul Fusion, mainly because of the support that was coming out for Fluffals. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the deck. So, for starters, I am running 3 Fluffal Dog. Fluffal Dog, if you don't already know, is your searcher. When it's normal or special summoned, you can search a Fluffal or an Edgemp Sabers from your deck to your hand. You can only use its effect once per turn, but that's usually all you need. Running 3 Fluffal Bear. Fluffal Bear is one of the main play starters in the deck. You discard it from your hand to set Toy Vendor to the field, and then you can immediately activate Toy Vendor. You can also tribute it if it's on the field to get back one of your used polymerizations, but you can only use one of its effects per turn, so that does kind of suck right there, but you know, it's definitely worth it. I did cut Fluffal Wings down to 2. Before I was running it at 3, but it did kind of get a little bricky after adding in some of the other support. But 2 is still a really good number, and it lets you use Fluffal Bear's other effect to recycle a polymerization. I'm also running 3 Fluffal Penguin. Fluffal Penguin, in my opinion, is just a really good material. When it's used as a fusion material for a Frightfur monster, you can draw 2 and then discard 1. Also, if it's on the field during your main phase, you can special summon a monster from your hand except for Penguin. You can only use that effect once while the card's on the field, which again isn't really all that bad, especially since you can bounce it with cards like Fluffal Sheep. Run 2 Octopus. One of Octopus's main roles in this deck is to actually get cards back from banishment. It gets them back from the graveyard too, but that's not quite as relevant. When it's normal or special summoned, you can pull 1 from the graveyard and add it to your hand, or if it's sent to the graveyard as a fusion material, you can target up to 2 banished monsters and return them to the graveyard. Like, say, I don't know, Fluffal Wings and any other Fluffal. Just a thought. I do also run 2 Fluffal Owl. Fluffal Owl is polymerization on legs, and it can also search for a polymerization. If you use its effect to fuse using it and other cards, you're going to have to pay life points, but yeah, that's really negligible. And lastly, for the Fluffals, I'm running 1 Fluffal Sheep. If I was running Mrs. Radiant, this is like an instant Mrs. Radiant. You can special summon it from your hand if you control a Fluffal monster, and you can also return a Fluffal monster you control to the hand to special summon an Edgemp monster from your hand or graveyard. That's really great for getting back Chain or Edgemp Sabers if you've already used his effect. Like I just said, I am running 3 Edgemp Chain. Its first effect almost never comes up. When it declares an attack, you can add an Edgemp Chain from your deck to your hand. Never, ever, ever want to see this on the field attacking. Its real use is if it's sent from the hand or field to the graveyard, you can add a Frightfur card from your deck to your hand, and you can only use 1 effect per turn and only once that turn. With the new support from Soul Fusion, this got a whole nother use, and yeah, it's just absolutely amazing, and we'll get into that when we get to the cards. I'm running 1 Edgemp Sabers, searchable. You can special summon it back out from the graveyard. It's just a really good card. And lastly, for my Edgemps, I'm running 1 Edgemp Cotton Eater. Its monster effect I do not care about at all. The only thing I care about is its Pendulum effect. That gives all your Frightfur monsters an additional 300 attack. They get big enough as it is between Sabretooth and Tiger, giving them buffs. But this just adds a little bit extra. And then once per turn, if a Frightfur fusion monster is summoned to your field, you can draw a card. This is just an extra little extender that I really like to have. It's usable by almost half of your fusions. It's searchable. There really isn't much of a downside other than the fact that it's level 7. So it's kind of hard to summon, but at the same time it's still not that bad. And for the last of the monsters, I do still run 3 King of the Swamp. King of the Swamp is just an extra Edge Imp Sabers or Polymerization, depending on what I need at the time. But either way, it's always a good card to see. Now moving on to the spells and traps, I do run 1 Fusion Sub and 2 Polymerization. I've tried it with 3 Polymerization, and I don't know. I just like the Fusion Sub for its graveyard effect. Running 3 Instant Fusion, because you've got to have that Edge Imp or that Frightfur Sheep out easily. Just makes a lot of your plays a hell of a lot easier later on. 3 Toy Vendor to go with our 3 Bear. 1 Frightfur Factory to do a little bit extra fusing. And same thing with Frightfur Fusion, fusing with monsters in the grave. And now for the reason why I made this update. 3 Frightfur Patchwork. I am so happy that this is finally in the TCG. For those of you that don't know, Frightfur Patchwork lets you add an Edge Imp monster and a Polymerization from your deck to your hand. You will be going for Edge Imp Chain every single time. You use it as a fusion material, it goes to the graveyard, then activates its effect, getting you another Frightfur Patchwork to your hand. Now you can only activate 1 Patchwork per turn, but this does set you up for next turn. Yeah, this is just an amazing card, and I am so happy to see it in the game finally. I'm also running 1 Foolish Burial. That's mostly to send Edge Imp Sabers to the grave, although occasionally you do need to send a Fluffal. 1 Foolish Burial Goods, that is to send Toy Vendor, and when you send Toy Vendor you get a search, so this is basically any Fluffal or Edge Imp Sabers. 1 Monster Reborn, just in case we need to pull some of our fusion monsters out of the grave. And 1 Soul Charge, just in case we need to pull a lot of stuff out of the grave. Now normally I save the Link monsters for last, but I am running 1 Wee Witch's Apprentice. This is basically the dark version of Mrs. Radiant. I did run Mrs. Radiant in here for a while, but it was just taking up too much room in the main deck trying to get out Earth monsters. But with Wee Witch's Apprentice, I can use Sheep and then make Tiger, or Sheep and then make Sabertooth, and then just pull Sheep out of the grave and make Wee Witch's Apprentice, and then I can keep going from there. But yeah, this card just works so much better than Mrs. Radiant does in the deck. So on to the Frightfurs. I am running 2 Sheep. Like I mentioned before, Sheep is pretty important to actually building a good board of fusion monsters. Its effect doesn't really have too much to do with that. It's mostly the fact that it's level 5 and can be pulled out with Sabertooth. But it does have a really good effect. If it battles, your opponent's cards and effects can't be activated until the end of the damage step. And if it gets destroyed by battle or by your opponent's card while it's in your control, you can special summon it back from the graveyard and give it an extra 800 attack. Got my 3 Frightfur Tigers. Frightfur Tiger uses Edge Imp Sabers and 1 or more Fluffal monsters. And when it's fusion summoned, depending on how many materials you used, you can pop that many cards on the field. And one thing that's great about that effect is that they don't have to be your opponent's cards. They can be yours too if you need. Oh, and this also gives your Frightfur monsters 300 attack for each Frightfur and Fluffal monster you control. So this can start getting really big really quick, and it can also make your other Frightfur monsters really big really quick. Now Frightfur Wolf isn't anywhere near as important in the deck as he used to be. Before this was your OTK. If you fusion summon it, depending on how many materials you use between Edge Imp Sabers and all the Fluffals that you want, it can make that many attacks per battle phase. And with its base 2000 attack, 4 attacks is usually enough to get over just about anybody. but yeah, it's not all that useful anymore, just because I have ways to buff up my other Frightfur monsters, like with Tiger and Sabretooth and Wee Witch's Apprentice, so that I don't need the one monster. Frightfur Bear, I don't really make it all that often, but it's more for being able to search Fluffal Bear. But if you do decide to make it, when it's destroyed by an opponent's monster, or when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can equip it to Frightfur Bear with the effect of it gives Frightfur Bear 1000 attack. Not bad, but yeah, definitely not great. I run one Frightfur Daredevil. Daredevil is more of a late game card if you've been having to grind a little bit, since if it's destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can deal 500 damage to your opponent for each Frightfur monster in your graveyard. It does have another effect where it burns for 1000 if it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, but that doesn't come up too much because of Tiger blowing things up. Kraken also does a really good job of blowing things up. Once per turn, you target a monster and send it to the graveyard. Doesn't destroy, but it does target, and then it can't attack directly the turn that you use that effect, but you can still attack with it, so keep that in mind. Also, it can make 2 attacks during each battle phase, and once per turn at the end of the battle phase, if it battled, you can change it to defense position. So that is really, really good. And the fact that it only takes an Edge Imp and a Fluffal just makes it that much better. And lastly, 3 Frightfur Sabretooth. Like I mentioned before, it's on summon effect where it pulls Frightfur monsters from the graveyard is just way too good not to run 3 in this deck. Like I mentioned before, you go into Chain, or go into Sheep, and then go into this, pulling Sheep out of the grave. Then you get Wee Witch's Apprentice. You can make another Frightfur Sabretooth after that, and you can just keep pulling stuff out of the grave from there. With a couple of these and 1 Tiger, just your Sabretooths alone are going to be enough to deal over 8,000 damage, plus the fact that you have Tiger out means that you probably cleared the field of just about any threats that you had to worry about. So you should be able to get off your OTK really, really easily with just like a couple of these and a Tiger. But that is all for the deck. Again, I am so happy that we finally have Frightfur Patchwork in the game. I was proxying it for a little while, but yeah, now that it's actually in the game, I don't have to do that. Thank you guys so much for checking out the profile, and if you did like the video, please be sure to leave a like down in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos just like this, and as I always say guys, have a great day.